Hello everybody, welcome back to Wolfeei. Today we're going to be talking about Minecraft Twitch Rivals House of Nightmares Edition. This is an event review. It's going to be a probably very lengthy video because I wrote down a lot of my thoughts on this event. But before we get into it, I wrote down an intro as well. I am fully prepared, okay, for this one. For once, 5-page document. It's a lot. An intro. Okay, well there's an ad. What kind of Lewis Fulham, I guess. In case there are new viewers or Twitch Rivals staff watching, hello, I am Wolfeei. I'm a partner Twitch streamer who participates in the House of Nightmares, or who participated in the House of Nightmares event, finishing in an overall place of 26th during the final game of day 4. I'm most known for my work in the Minecraft event community, from making content on this channel and Twitch to hosting one of the most successful Minecraft events ever called Block Wars. Besides that, I was also an internal tester for MC Championships from late 2020 until mid 2021, and I've played in many different Minecraft events, including multiple Minecraft Twitch Rivals events. To showcase some of that, Block Wars right here. Here is proof of my participation in some events where I have earned money. These are all Twitch Rivals events that are, written down here. And I don't have proof of my participation in MCC because confidential information, but I did sign an NDA. So, that, my credentials, there you go. Those are my credentials. If you're interested in my help for future Minecraft Twitch Rivals events, I am willing to have a conversation through text and or through voice chat. I already, I have contact with one of your people. If you want to hit my line, you can hit my line. Okay, there you go. Also, I wrote down show tweet before continuing. I want to get this out of the way for the YouTube audience before anyone misses out, I guess, or whatever. As much as this Minecraft Twitch Rivals event had many issues, please remember to stay respectful to the staff and players, especially publicly. Feedback is important, but should always be left with good intent. This situation affects the entire Minecraft event scene. I've seen a lot of people talk very negatively about this, and I understand, obviously, that a lot of things went wrong. But one thing that I think is very important to remember is that Twitch Rivals, whether you like it or not, is at the forefront of advertising the Minecraft event community to companies who may potentially be interested in spending money on, advertisement within this community. And if Twitch Rivals Minecraft doesn't go well, their perspective on the whole scene, regardless of if they've ever seen an MCC, a Block Wars, a Pandora's Box, etc., their perspective is going to be negative, because if this big thing is negative, they're going to assume, well, the big thing's probably the best thing, so if this is bad, the rest is bad. Typically, okay? I'm not saying that's fully the case. I'm sure other companies are aware of something like an MCC, but generally we should remain awareness of Twitch Rivals being at the center of what a company or a corporation may see. And also, reminder, it is extremely important for those corporations and companies to be interested in the scene, because it allows events like Block Wars and potentially MCC, I don't know if they have sponsor deals or sponsor things planned, but it allows those events to continuously sustain themselves by having, paying their staff team fairly for the work that they do, because voluntary work, as much as it's very nice to have, it's not going to last forever, okay? If people don't get paid, eventually they're going to have to stop putting their time and effort into hosting a for fun event like Block Wars and find a job where their skills will be properly rewarded, okay? I hope that's understandable. I hope everyone is on the same page there. So, just want to get this out here first. Another thing, I also wrote down a big disclaimer. I'm gonna have the Lewis POV in the background. You're just gonna see Lewis nod and whatnot. Actually, I'll just leave it like here. Lewis talked about a lot of this as well, and while writing this script, I did watch Lewis's live perspective on everything, pretty much, and some of his opinions and feedback is incorporated into what I wrote down. Please, if you want a full detailed discussion, explanation on exactly Day 5, because that's the main portion, and Lewis recaps the entire event too. But if you want a detailed discussion about it, please check out Lewis or Fulham on Twitch, and you'll get a proper, full perspective on it. I'm gonna just write it or talk about this from my perspective, and give my thoughts. They will be worded very differently. I'm sure Lewis had a lot more, he was a little bit more upset about what happened because it affected his very, very close friends. And as much as these are also my friends, I'm trying to keep the perspective from an event host in mind, because it's important to keep that in mind. Because if you are upset and you unleash all that aggression and anger on them, it's going to demotivate them from continuing forward, and that's ultimately not a good thing. Anyways, moving forward, intro is done. Disclaimer. Hannah and Sylvie should in no way be held responsible for the poor decision-making of the admins during the making and organization of this event. Hannah and Sylvie do not deserve any backlash for this event either. They were the faces of the event and responsible for player invites, not for coding and designing the games. First part. My feedback for this event will be based on the gameplay of the event, not the visuals. The team responsible for the builds and video segments before and during the event have done a fantastic job. The story is well made too. Genuinely one of the most visually impressive Minecraft events ever made. GUIs were amazing, video segments were amazing, storytelling was amazing, a lot of this event was amazing. Proximity chat made the event very fun to play and created the opportunity for streamers to temporarily collaborate and create funny moments. The inclusion of a hub minigame through the egg hunt created content during the downtime periods of Twitch Rivals, which is also very, very nice. That is something that is typically an oversight, and it's very good to see included here. I also don't fault the builders or developers for the majority of the event's issues. Bugs happen while developing, and it's the responsibility of the project lead to get testers involved that will spot the bugs in advance so developers can fix them. A lot of what happened during this event would have been immediately caught by properly playtesting the games even just once, which is obvious since the players played the games once and caught a lot of the bugs. I think a lot of what happened in this event will boil down to a lack of playtesting, and a lot of my feedback will showcase this too, as a lot of issues that were apparent immediately from sometimes even just reading the game descriptions and rules could have been immediately caught by testers, and feedback would have been given and changes would have been made. Next up, event info. I just want to get this out here for anyone who potentially was not fully caught up, just so it is known that what was intended. I'm trying to skip through my music because for some reason it decided to just completely vanish on me. Either way, event info. There were an intended 150 participant slots. I think it ended up being like 140 something. It was close. A couple people didn't show up. The event spanned over 5 days, and there was an intended 2 minigames per day. What ended up happening was that day 3 had 1 minigame played and 1 skipped, and day 3 had 3 minigames to compensate for, day 4 had 3 minigames to compensate for the missing game in the day before. So that is something to keep in mind. I'm still trying to fix my music here because it's still not working. There we go. All right. Players get eliminated each day until there are 20 players left on day 5. This is an important detail because anyone who was eliminated before day 5 received 0 financial compensation for participating in the event. Obviously, some people will make money from streaming, but the event itself did not reward money past the top 20, which is okay. I don't think that's terrible. I think that's fine. I don't think that's something that people should be super harsh about. I do, however, think it is a little bit ridiculous to have a 100k prize pool and 70% of that was intended to go to one of the 150 players. That is kind of insane because that amount of money is ridiculous. I'll actually address it too here because I wrote it down. The intended prize pool split was that people who placed 20th to 3rd, which was all the people who played or who didn't make it past game 1 of the final day, all those players receive $1,000, which still applied, but it was instead of 20th to 3rd, 20th to 5th. I'll get into that in a little bit. So that is $18,000 of the prize pool going to 18 players intended. Then there is $82,000 left for 2 players to gain. 12,000 of that goes to 2nd place. 70,000 of that goes to 1st. What ended up happening There will be more at the end, but what ended up happening on Twitch's side was that during the last day of the event, Twitch decided to add an extra $10,000 into their prize pool as a reward for the people who placed 3rd and 4th, in which both players received $6,000, including the $1,000 from 20th to 3rd. So $1,000 for 20th to 5th was what ended up happening. 4th and 3rd get $6,000, 5,000 of which for each comes from the additional 10K. 12,000 still for 2nd intended, and 70,000 for 1st intended. Spoiler alert, that didn't end up happening. The finalists, the final two, Shadoon and Sneak Snag, decided to want to split. They pulled a Hunger Games moment. If you haven't watched Hunger Games 1, I'm sorry. Spoiler alert. You had your time. They split the prize. So $41,000 goes to each participant, which I think was a good decision. I'll get to that at the end. All of that out the way, 11 minutes of talking. Time to get into the gameplay. This will be the main bulk of my review, because I think a lot of things here, unfortunately, didn't go entirely according to what should have happened, and I am a little bit disappointed because of how many Minecraft Twitch Rivals events have been hosted in the past, and how seemingly they don't really, or this team didn't look at past mistakes and ensure that they wouldn't happen again, because game design issues have been a thing in the past. Administrative decisions on whether something should be skipped, redone, etc. have been messed up in the past, and unfortunately, the same thing happened here again. Alright, let's talk about the gameplay. An apparent focus of the gameplay is to not have too much skill involvement. Especially in the earlier days of the event, games had elements of RNG that made it so anyone can win, in quotations. This is a fine feature for an event like this, where there's a large player base containing many players who rarely play Minecraft, and also players who play Minecraft competitively almost daily. So keep in mind, whether it was intentional or not, the range of skill in this event was astronomical. You have one of the best players, like a Feinberg, competing with some of the worst players, not to name any names, but you can probably imagine. So the skill difference is almost the maximum potential. The only way you could have changed it is if you got the sweatiest 14-year-old playing against their grandma, you know, whatever. All right. However, this should not have applied throughout the entirety of the event, the RNG elements, especially in the later days of the event. It seems very inconsistent to have almost every game be based mainly on RNG, but then throw in one random game that requires a minimum level of movement skill. This refers to the last game of day 4, which was the determining game, the deciding game of who does and who does not get a portion of the prize pool, which feels very inconsistent, and that is a very key moment to randomly involve skill. Coincidentally, this game also involved quote-unquote teamwork. We'll get into that in a little bit too. Either way, continuing on. Without going into detail per game, my feedback on this event's gameplay is that it was very inconsistent. Some games were good, but still had flaws that could have easily been ironed out if the games were playtested. Some games were bad because eliminations would be caused by non-player issues like bugs or poor balancing. Again, this could have been prevented by having proper playtesters. As said earlier, this is a common point. Now we're going to get into the individual games review. If you did not watch the event, I recommend watching a VOD if you want to be fully caught up to speed on how the gameplay was experienced by different players, so you can understand the feedback more properly. Without context of how the gameplay went, it may not make as much sense, but that's just a heads up. Game 1 of day 1 was Lights Out. Lights Out wasn't very fun to have to start and stop over and over again. It was called Lights Out. In reality, it was red light, green light. Players had to, go through a relatively flat and straightforward course with very little obstacles in the way, and the only real gameplay element that changed this from just being a straight-up race course with no, unique gameplay elements was that you had to stop and not stop and stop and not stop and make sure that you wouldn't accidentally walk while the red light was on, because you would get, jump scared or something like that. I would say that the frustration caused by starting and stopping over and over again would have been something that would have immediately been very common feedback in playtesting. So something that could have been prevented. The map was too long for the pace of the game. Starting and stopping frequently can work if the map doesn't take a while to get through. I understand wanting to have a long game mode, especially when there's only two games being played per day, but other gameplay mechanics like laps or more movement variety would have achieved the same goal without having to, have gameplay like starting and stopping over and over and over. So, look at other event race games like Ace Race, like Block Wars Race, like even Speedrun, etc., etc. You could have had players go through a shorter course multiple times. You could have had players go through a shorter course multiple times with slight alterations of the map. It wouldn't have to be a loop. It could just be a copy-paste, relatively straightforward thing with some altered versions of the map. Ultimately, this would probably not have been too much of extra workload because you only need a third of the size that you did right now and make slight changes. So ultimately, you're copy-pasting the majority of each segment over, and you don't have to build a massive map. So potentially could even save time and resources while having an increased quality of gameplay. Day 1, Game 2 was Skull, Scroll, and Blade. This is Rock, Paper, Scissors, which was honestly, in my opinion, considering the gameplay in this event, solid. I wrote down good, pretty solid. It worked well and it fits into the intention of the event. The psychological gameplay was fun. Someone like a 5up very much praised this game because obviously he is, an Among Us player, and Among Us players have to play, with psychological elements very frequently. So I think this was a fine game. I think compared to events like MCC, etc., yeah, it's a bit lackluster. It's just rock, paper, scissors. I think it was okay. I think it was fine. To not be too strict, obviously, it was fine. Day 2. First game, I'm just going to call them by how they're referred to on the website. So Game 3, which was on Day 2. The first game there was Monsters and Prey. This game was solid, definitely better than Lights Out. It was pretty much a race course, except there was actually obstacles. There was actually parkour elements. There was actually, some gameplay that caused you to have to look at the screen and not just hold W and turn your mouse left and right every now and then. You had to actually, pay attention. Don't get attacked by the monsters and don't get stunned. Don't, miss a jump because you might get set back, etc., etc. It was actually pretty interesting. The reason that this game is definitely better than Lights Out is partially because people weren't forced to stop on a timer, but also because there were genuine obstacles to consider during the game, which is both more fun for players and more entertaining for viewers. Reiterating what I already said, but that is my feedback on Monsters and Prey. I think that was a good step forward, and ideally you wouldn't have done 2 race courses, especially not in 2 back-to-back days. But the Monsters and Prey rendition was definitely better than the Lights Out rendition. Next up is Game 4, which is the second game of Day 2, called Conjurer's Challenges. This game was essentially like you had to complete tasks across a map for like 5 or 6 times, and the last people to complete the tasks would get eliminated, and then I think they're turned into hunters. That seemed a little bit inconsistent, but it might have been like the last person to qualify is the hunter, and then some people just get eliminated if they don't complete it. I'm not too sure. Regardless, let's continue. This game was solid, but there was a very significant lack of game-provided assistance, like an indicator of the location you had to go to. Your next step being on the top left of your screen was seemingly not explained, but that may have been a player issue by some participants. The result of this is that players were forced to play in a group and hope that they would be led to the right location. Not bad, not great. It was okay. Compared to the games we had seen before, this game had more depth, more variety, more actual gameplay involved, and clearly there was a variety of design choices that were made for this game, and there was actual some sort of game design, but it would have been obvious that more was needed for this game to be good if you had playtested it. Next up, we'll go to Day 3. Game 5, or the first game of Day 3, was Doll Curse. Essentially what this was that players had to just guess which doll was good and which doll was bad. Good dolls, or actually, I'll just read what I said. The safe dolls served no gameplay value. It may have just been implemented to increase the length of the game, which it successfully did. But for players, it was a little bit frustrating because it was just pointless. I mean, people would vote for it because they're like, this is the good one. But it served absolutely zero purpose to the game at all. It just kind of draws it out. And something that already happens with Twitch Rivals often is that the games are drawn out, or the event is drawn out, just for the main broadcast to be able to, talk about it and make content about it, which is good, nice, great. But it can be frustrating for the players to have to deal with this, because often we are just told to wait, and typically there is not much we can do in the meantime, especially during something like Doll Curse, where voting kind of didn't matter. If you were, the majority gets to pick the vote, and the majority is just whoever screams the loudest, that's where people go. So it was fine. Another point is that there was a lack of clarity with how many dolls there were in each round. This may have been explained, it's just something that I may have missed. I know other players shared the same sentiment on this, that they were not aware of exactly how many dolls were going to be in every single thing. The next game, intended for day 3, which is one of the biggest factors as to why this event is so discussed to the level that it has been discussed, was supposed to be Prop Hunt. Now, I'll just read my points. This game was clearly flawed in game design, as spawning in as a hunter in any of the 4 rounds was just clearly the advantageous position, as known by the players from reading the rules before the game. This was also the first game to introduce multiple new elements of gameplay at the same time, which caused confusion for some of the players. This later proves to be an issue. The decision to initially redo this game was rushed and caused some players to throw in favor of learning the game for the potential redo, which resulted in several issues during the discussion in the Discord during the pause. The decision to eventually skip this game was okay given the circumstances, as just continuing forward was no longer possible. This is an issue pretty much just fully created by the decision making of the admins, and it was an issue that was later no longer able to be fixed because of the decisions made by the admins. So it was a created issue by them, and they then had to deal with it, and it was a poor decision making. But they already are aware of this because the players made sure to tell them that in many different ways. It should, I feel like it's been obvious at this point what the feedback was there. The reasoning for the redo was that not all players had the same information available, which is factually incorrect, as everyone was pinged in the same channel in the Discord with the same information. This applies to every single game for every single day. Everyone was given the same information, or at least intended to be given the same information. I will not be going further into that, but this is not a game-specific issue, and is not a reason for why this game should have been redone or skipped. This was the initial reason that they gave, but it made absolutely zero sense, and that was very quickly, spoken about by the players, including players who would have been eliminated, who were in agreement that this decision made no sense. Let's see. The reason that was argued to skip this game was that the game was bugged, which the admins themselves then confirmed was incorrect. In all fairness, this decision, or this opinion, or this information was given after the event had already, or the day of the event had already finished, and a changed decision clearly was no longer possible. But, like I said, the claim was that the game was bugged, and that was just factually incorrect. The claimed bug was not a bug, just a poor design choice. Unknowingly, the decision to scrap this game negatively affected the rest of the event, especially during day 5, and we'll get into that a little bit further in a bit too. Now on to day 4, game 6, which was a day 3 rerun, which was Doll Curse, but again. The changes that were made were good, but didn't entirely fix the game. Definitely an improvement on the day 3 version of Doll Curse. What they changed was that because since instead of 10 players getting eliminated, it was 30 players who got eliminated. 6 players went out in each round, and there was only 5 rounds. And they cranked up the difficulty of the dolls a little bit, but it ended up not being that much. It ended up just kind of being an RNG simulator again, because players would group together in very big groups, either 2 groups or 1 group, in just one corner of the map, and if the dolls didn't end up going there, they would just kind of sit there and not get attacked until one of them randomly shows up, and then whoever just happens to be at the back gets unlucky and gets eliminated. All right, moving on. Game 7, which is on day 4 still, was Move in Silence. This game had a lot of rules, but despite all of it, the game fell short because of poor balancing in favor of the hunters. Yet again, another game that they made that was very biased towards hunters. Another role that was randomly assigned and players pretty much had no control over getting. You could vote or opt in to be a hunter, but one from the rules and gameplay, or one from the game description, rules, and explanation, it is clearly obvious that the hunters are favored. You wouldn't be surprised that most people decided to want to be a hunter. There were 40 people who were in the running, and I think it ended up being 27 or 28 people who wanted to be a hunter, which is clearly the majority. This game took only a few minutes from start to finish, which is very odd when it's advertised to take an hour. This could have been prevented by having non-staff playtest the game. Obviously, it would have been immediately caught that hunters are broken, and it was just kind of ridiculous from start to finish that hiders were expected to survive for an hour, which I think would have been very boring in terms of watching the event from just the small portion of gameplay that we saw. Because from my perspective, I was in a group and I ended up doing literally nothing. I just benefited from being in a group. The only reason that we survived was because 8 people got eliminated and the hunters were just super quick, because there's 2 groups split, 4 kills on each side. When a hunter is super broken and OP, 4 kills take about 5 minutes, and the game took about 5 minutes. That is Move in Silence. Next up is Game 8, Run of Terror. What I wrote here is, in terms of pure gameplay design, this game is one of, if not the best game from House of Nightmares. The intensity of teams having to work together while still competing is cool. The fact that whoever makes it out of this game alive gets part of the prize pool is cool. The issue with this game is that it was not as team-focused as it was advertised. Teammates should have been teleported to the next checkpoint if any of the teammates reached it, as that would have prevented team balancing from being such a major factor in who did and didn't qualify, which is especially apparent from the weakest team having 0 qualifying players, which ended up being the team I was on. People may argue that this is a biased perspective, but I do think this it was true, especially because in the Discord, people or the staff actively told us if one of the teammates makes it, the rest of the team makes it, or something in terms of checkpoints. I could be wrong, don't quote me on that, but it seemed like they said something along those lines, and that ended up not really being the case, because the other teammates kind of just had to play by themselves, and that's about it. Either way, that was day 1 until day 4, all the games. So these are all the games that were played without money involved. This was just being eliminated before people got money. Obviously, you can understand that people were frustrated before going out in the game right before the prize pool was actually, active. But it is what it is, right? It is what it is. You should understand that once money gets involved, you would expect that the gameplay follows suit. This would be the best of the event, the most consistent, the most reliable. Proves to not be the case. Let's start. Game 9, Haunted Pursuit, which was the first game of day 5. Something that I think is very important to mention here is that 18 of the 20 players get eliminated here. For a game that's supposed to determine who makes an insane amount of money, the lack of playtesting had too much impact on the gameplay. An almost inexcusable amount of impact on the gameplay. By pure design, it seemed beneficial to hang around the middle and wait for someone else to grab a key just so you could steal it and hopefully qualify. The invulnerability received from grabbing the key from another player simply was too strong in range of the doors and meant that it was not worth to run towards the door unless you were within a radius that takes 5 seconds to traverse, which is likely around 20 blocks, which is very significant. The game was flawed, and it was not worth to play aggressively as someone who, grabbed the key initially. There seemed to be no benefits. It seemed to be just hope. It's random, And even hit registration seemed inconsistent because from the first round, when Sapnap ended up scoring, or I guess, yeah, I'll call it scoring. When Sapnap ended up going through, I did not review Sapnap's POV, but from the POV that I did watch, which was Feinberg's POV, he was very clearly punching the person dead on with no obstruction in the way, no players in the way, and it didn't register, which seemed to be a ping issue or something, whatever you want to call it. It seemed very inconsistent, and it caused a lot of frustration. It was also, the bugs were apparent in this game as well. It was technically redone, but Sapnap and Shadoon were given a pass, which I think was, all in all, a good decision, because they do not deserve to be screwed over for, actually achieving getting through this goal. They deserve to, get a chance to play. So that was handled fine, handled well. The other players got a chance to compete again, from which Sneak, Snag, and Feinberg ended up competing, which is good. Sure, cool. 4 people in the running now. Nice. Now we get into the finale game. Nightmare Nexus, which is the last game of day 5. Parts of this gameplay, like the door maze and the level flicking, seemed poorly explained. None of the players were aware that this was included in the game at all, which seems like an oversight, especially for the finale game. You would expect that the most attention is given to the most important parts of the event, like I said, and seemingly there was a massive oversight here where the players were unaware. Keep in mind that the players are intended to be 2 people, but it ended up being 4 people. Players were unaware of some of these gameplay elements at all. It seemed to not be obvious from the start. Again, maybe it was explained, but from what I watched, from the players' reception of seeing the gameplay commence in the video, you see the gameplay play out, they were unaware. Connect 4 was surprisingly intense as a finale game, but the decision to include misses completely overthrew the integrity of a finale game and allowed players to throw on purpose. You could argue that sportsmanship comes into play, but when there is $70,000 on the line, do you expect someone to not try to sway the game in their favor? This is another core gameplay issue that could have been prevented by proper playtesting, from which they would have received great feedback, and very useful feedback, and very immediate feedback, because this is such an obvious issue. Having the ability to miss in a game like Connect 4 means that you can just stall out your loss, or hypothetically your win too, but why would you ever do that? You can stall out your loss forever. And this ended up happening in the very final game, which was between Sneak, Snag, and Shadoon, where neither of them ended up winning a round, and they ended up stalemating twice, because the board ended up filling almost to the max, where only like 4 or 8 spots were remaining, and either of them making a play wouldn't really result in anything. So the Twitch Rival staff decided to the admins of the event, I don't know if Twitch Rival staff are responsible for this, I don't want to hold them accountable for everything, because it's kind of the default name that I go for, but the admins just reset the board, and they just go, do it again. And after 2 redos, Sneak, Snag, and Shadoon completely just stopped playing. I don't know if I wrote more about this, but we'll get there. Another very big and very important thing to mention about the finale game was that Feinberg's miss was absolutely unexplainable. The way that was handled was the most inconsistent across the entire event. Upon reviewing the clip from multiple different POVs, the admins decided to not redo the round despite the black hole clearly being positioned above the intended row. The admins claim it was a miss, but in the game it was registered as column is not available, which means that the game thought that the skull hit, but on either the left or right side. Both of which, according to the map design, were full rows. So that functions, but the hit registration made absolutely 0 sense. This situation was clearly not a player issue, as from Feinberg's perspective and many other perspectives, he should have hit according to what was displayed on all perspectives. his throw was not registering properly, or his throw not registering properly was an issue from how the game was created. But in that case, they should still not have counted to in that case, the round should still not have counted to stay consistent with the choices they made for prop hunt on day 3. An actual additional note here is that the players proposed a 4-way split between all the semifinalists, in which each player would receive $20,500 to compensate for both Sapnap and Feinberg's unfair losses without punishing the players who won. Twitch Rivals did not end up picking this option, which is fine. That is completely okay. What ended up happening is okay. I think it's, a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. I hope all of that, it made sense. It's now time for my conclusion. I wrote down a conclusion, and this is potentially, more positive than you would expect. This entire event looked amazing. It was one of the most visually impressive Minecraft events hosted thus far, and this is across all of Minecraft. And I would argue that this is kind of undeniable. Visually, this event was very, very impressive. The level of intensity throughout the event was top-notch as well, and created a lot of cool and entertaining moments. The inclusion of proximity voice chat ended up playing out super well for how the game was designed. The slight horror elements, created tension, and for some people even, jump scares and scary moments. And I thought that this was really fun, really interesting. The amount of effort in these areas of the event were amazing and should not be overlooked. I understand that a lot of people will be looking at the game issues, the game design issues, the bug issues, the management issues, etc., etc., etc. But please do not forget that everything else looked really cool. I'm pretty sure Lewis Fulham, as much as he's muted right now, is talking about it here too, because the chat is saying the same things. The builds, the GUI, the little video segments in-game, etc. Everything looked fantastic, phenomenal, and was really good. And I don't think anything there would have been something I would change. The audio work was very good, the voice lines, the way the mobs were designed, etc., etc. It looked fantastic. So that's very good. Another thing that I will say now, I don't know if this has already been brought to the public, is that some of the players did ask for this event to hopefully return at some point in the future, preferably around the time of Halloween, because it fits the theme. But we would like to see the games be altered, maybe even new games, etc., and be tested. This event deserves a rerun with proper game design and proper testing. It deserves it, because the amount of effort that went into it is a lot. It's very important to recognize that, and the players, including some of the most screwed over people, were in agreement that a rerun would be very interesting and worth it. It's worth the effort to do this event again. Further on with what I wrote down, the main issue with this event was the lack of playtesting and a lack of game design experience with some of the games. The calls from the admin team when something went wrong during the event was unfortunately very inconsistent, which proved to cause issues during the most important parts of the event on day 5. This refers to the final game, but also, most importantly the final game, but even the other game had interesting decision making. Thankfully, the resolution they had at the end was almost perfect. It would have probably been the best option they could have gone with. This issue could have been solved by having a set list of rules in case things go wrong. This is something that Lewis said, because according to him, and he has been a caster in the past, so he would probably know this. According to him, Twitch Rivals sometimes has like a set rules of, a set rules of protocols or guidelines where, in the instance that a player has this specific issue, this specific solution is given, no exceptions at all. So you could say, for example, in the instance that a player lags out of a game in the middle and doesn't log back in within 30 seconds, they are disqualified from the event. That would have been a rule, and if that is written in paper and agreed on by Twitch Rivals, then there is no argument against that. That is in the rules, that's fine. As long as it's consistent and it's written down, people can't argue with it, and it's okay. The issue was that there was a long set of rules, by the way, that we were told to strictly follow, Continuously, those rules had been broken and have been broken throughout the event by multiple people, not just one and not just one party. Multiple people from different parties broke rules. Nothing was acted on. When it was worded super strictly, nothing was acted on, and that is a shame. The drama that occurred after day 3 was very unfortunate. This was mostly caused by Curryaway's reaction to Sapnap's behavior, which was a result of poor decision making during prop hunt. Both of them made mistakes and said things that they shouldn't have, given the situation for both sides. Obviously, I already made a video about this like a couple days ago, which is mostly talking about Sapnap's behavior, because that was the only thing I was aware of. I have since looked more on both sides, and I can agree that both Curry and Sapnap were in the wrong here. Arguably, Curry more in the wrong because of his personal bias that he threw into this situation unpromptedly. Sapnap did not deserve the level of hate that he received from this event. Was he annoying other players during day 1, 2, and 3? Yes, but so were other players, and they were not called out for it. Sapnap was the most apparent player to break rules, potentially because he is popular, and thus received some backlash, which was fueled by some people's personal bias towards him and or his friends, i.e. Dream. This was uncalled for and straight up rude. People involved from both parties acted immaturely and on impulse, which was not at all helpful during this entire tournament. Let me remind everyone that both parties acted immaturely. Sapnap and Sapnap's side acted immaturely. This is pretty much factually correct. But also, Curryaway and Curryaway's side acted immaturely. This is also pretty much fact. You can obviously have an opinion on what is immature and what is not immature, but I feel like most people I spoke to, including participants of the event, agree on this, that both parties are in the wrong. Let's move on from that. The decision to split the prize pool between the two final players is good, but it's not like much could have been done without completely upsetting everyone involved. Shadoon and Sneaksnack both were not interested in playing to win anymore and proposed a split, which Twitch thankfully followed through with. I'm very happy that this decision was actually made, because had they just refused, it would have caused an absolute uproar and outrage on Twitter, and would have probably left this event with more negativity, which I don't think benefits anyone, really. So, yeah, just truthfully speaking there. Finally, I want to say that I want the result of this event to be that Twitch rivals can improve their quality rather than that their Minecraft events get entirely cancelled like some viewers have suggested. They are at the forefront of sponsored Minecraft events, and unfortunately the entire scene is just in dire need of company interest to continue to spend money on advertising in the Minecraft event scene. There's a lot of value and talent in this community, and we should work towards building a sustainable environment for event players and viewers to enjoy. Minecraft Twitch Rivals events are a great opportunity for streamers to make some extra money while participating in a competition and create content together. And that's all I wrote down. Obviously, all I wrote down is something interesting to say when I spoke for 43 minutes. But that is it. I obviously have to acknowledge that a lot of things went wrong in this event. And I think people are right to be upset. I think, some of the players made genuine mistakes and created issues that could have been prevented if they just had not spoken out in the way that they did. I also think viewers should be held responsible for, creating a hive mind in favor of their viewers' opinion, and this caused a lot of issues as well. Sometimes even affecting the streamers without their consent or their control on the situation. Sometimes they were not in agreement of what their audience did. I heard from Shane, who was more neutral in this event and did a very good job in, being neutral towards both sides and just acting like a normal person according to his own words. I heard from Shane that Sapnap was not very happy and was a little upset, I think, during day 4, and that, Shane's, neutral talk with him and just letting him be included in the situation helped a lot, and I think that's very good, and it should not be overshadowed. Okay, look, you may have personal bias too as a viewer, or if you are a player watching this. Personal bias, completely understood. You do not have to like everybody. That is not a part of being a streamer, and that is obviously very obvious because we have seen people have issues with each other in the past. But please understand that you are someone with an audience, and that your audience typically will be in agreement of what you say, kind of no matter what, as long as it's within some level of reason. You are responsible for what your audience may do and may say and may act on, and you need to remember that before you speak out about a situation, especially when emotions are involved. I understand that things may come out of your mouth on impulse, but you should try to, control yourself. And if you say something bad, at least own up for it. I know Lewis did a decent job, at least, in this final 4-hour-long feedback session, where he acknowledged that Sapnap did also get unfairly affected by some of the decisions that were made during this event, especially during day 5. Either way, that is my review of Minecraft Twitch Rivals House of Nightmares. To go back to the disclaimer, I want to make one thing very, very clear. Hannah and Sylvie should in no way be held responsible for the poor decision-making of the admins during the making and organization of this event. Hannah and Sylvie do not deserve any backlash for this event either. Okay? That is something that I think is very important, because they were advertised to be at the front of this event, the forefront, and they were, publicly, seemingly responsible. But in reality, they are not, and they should not receive the backlash for some of the things that went wrong. Again, as well, reminder that the visuals of this event were fantastic, and that should still be appreciated and rewarded and acknowledged. That's where I leave it. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all later. Goodbye.